Story 1. I could not afford to without pushing myself and my children and her into poverty. As I got older, I started making more money and was finally able to afford to divorce properly. Story 2. Child of this dynamic here. My mother has told me verbatim, "I'm scared I'll be alone and never find happiness without him." Note that she has never lived alone and has always had a partner in her adult life. I'm much the same. Generational trauma? Except I don't hate my partner. My father is just not interested in change. He's simply content to live in malcontent. He goes to work, he goes home, and in between they might talk. They tried counseling once when I was very young. Mom describes her relationship with him as having a roommate she's married to. She's too scared of being alone to leave. No amount of children, dogs, or career changes have made their relationship work beyond being a faulty outlet for each other. Their love is only what they share love for. The children, the pets, the people around them, but not each other. She has asked me before if she thinks they still love each other, and I'm always honest. I say I think they have a deep bond, made with years of parenting and living together, but I don't feel any love between them. They're in a trap of their own making. Story 3. My parents had this relationship. If they had gotten a divorce, our former mother would have taken us, violently abused us, or abandoned us. She tried once and wasted any child support money on drugs and a shopping addiction. By staying together, Dad could at least monitor if we were alive or dead. It was extremely painful, but the alternative was worse. Do not have children with psychopaths. Story 4. When you have a disabled child, you need 4 hands on deck. She truly needs us both, so we are forced to make it work. She is happy, and that is all we want. Story 5. Should have asked me that 5 years ago. I stayed around for the children, thinking it was for the best. I learned otherwise eventually. Story 6. Cultural ramifications could be one reason. The country my parents were from, divorce was just not done. My uncle ended up getting divorced, and his father disowned him for it. My parents also really should have divorced but never did, even after I told them that I would not judge them if they did since no one was happy. Story 7. Not in that situation, but I know several people who are. The reality is simple. Getting divorced does not necessarily lead to the promised land. We in the United Kingdom live in a society where the cost of living means most of us have to be in a relationship with 2 earners. Good luck separating and finding a place to live, keeping a car on the road, and if there are children involved, working out what that looks like. We live in a falsely emancipated world. Story 8. Posting from an alternate account to be honest. I wouldn't say I hate my wife, but the dynamic has changed so much over our lives that she is unrecognizable from the person I fell in love with. She has retreated from the world and the home so much that it's almost impossible to be her partner. She works, gets home, and plays on her phone. I am not exaggerating when I say I do 90% of the cooking, cleaning, childcare, and home maintenance. This leads to a lot of stress and resentment on my end, but as much as she says she'll do better and help out, she doesn't. It gets better for a week and then reverts back to the habits. Why don't we divorce? Because I love her and I love my family. I know she used to be better, and I guess I'm hoping that one of these days we'll have a heart-to-heart, and it will stick. That the week of improvement becomes permanent. But the heart-to-hearts just end with me being angry anymore because I know it will just go back to how it was in a week. An apology works once or twice, but 10 times? 20 times? A lifetime of apologies and still not feeling heard or helped. I don't know. I guess I'm still just hoping. Story 9. My sister is staying for the child, but she doesn't delude herself that it's for the child's sake. She knows it's because she doesn't want to give up any time with them and miss out on half their life. She only has one child and will not have another. I think eventually they will break. Neither of them is happy, and nothing will change. But I can understand why she doesn't want him out of the house. Even if they split time with the child weekly and live around the corner from each other, she is still going to miss things. Story 10. Not me, but my parents. Money and old age keep a lot of people together who do not love or like each other. Story 11. Gauging from my in-laws, they do not really hate each other. They hate how their lives turned out, their daily existence, and that the other person is a reminder of the opportunities they disregarded while being with them, as well as a reminder of their own failure to create something more than what they have. Story 12. I think some people do not actually hate their spouses but have a hard time shifting perspectives or learning how to communicate and grow with each other, to be honest. Work is required in marriages, and some people do not have the energy nor want to dig deep and make changes to be with someone. Story 13. 4 years. It was because of my depression and untreated attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. I was miserable but frozen. He is also a hoarder, and I let myself fall into those habits. The house is a disaster. I am working to clean out the worst of the mess, at least the parts one can control, and reduce my personal belongings so I can assess the state of the house and possibly make it sellable. I owned it before we got married. It feels like every time I reach a point where I can start doing things, something knocks me back down. For example, me getting cancer, my mental health, him losing 4 jobs in 2 years and being home all the time. Sometimes it all seems incredibly overwhelming, and I get frozen trying to start. I do not have a support network. My family is small and far away, and I do not have any friends close enough to ask for the help I need. I have a good therapist, though. I haven't said any of this out loud in so long that I am crying now, and I haven't been able to cry for a while. I am so miserable and just feel so stuck. Story 14. I am the child of divorced parents, and I have seen what actually happens. People talk about divorce like it is ripping off a bandage, and you face a difficult situation for a short time. That is not true. Unless you are very well off, divorce lowers your children's socioeconomic status. If you were solidly middle class, you become lower middle class. If you were lower middle class before making it work, you may or may not be able to manage with only one income supporting your household. For parents who worked hard and were lucky enough to provide their children with a sound financial situation and a real future, that is not something you simply throw away. I am not putting my children into the difficult situation I experienced. Separately, things are slowly improving with my spouse, which confirms what I have heard about marriage having good years and bad years, ups and downs, with each partner thriving at different times. Perhaps storming out when my spouse was at their most stressed was not the smart and mature solution that others might suggest. Story 15. I really hope the young people here realize that life is not as simple as they think it is. Story 16. My children are not of school age yet, and I do not earn enough money for childcare while I work. I do not know how I am going to figure it out, but I am miserable. Story 17. My husband is critically ill without hope of improvement. Medicine no longer manages his symptoms well. He is unable to work. If we were in a state that allowed assisted suicide, he says he would do it. He just does not want me to find him someday outside of a natural death. Between his illnesses and the medications he takes, he is extremely quick to anger, never satisfied with anything, critical and verbally abusive. When you take your vows for in sickness and in health, you do not envision something this awful and extended. It has been 3 years so far. I do everything at home and work. I make enough to pay for everything, not enough to afford help, and too much for any assistance. We have no family who can help. I will not ask my friends. I am only 43. He did not do this to himself voluntarily. I will not leave. I hate the misery my life has become. I try not to feel negatively towards him, but cannot help it anymore. Story 18. A lot of the time it's about shared finances. My mother-in-law dislikes my father-in-law, but she wouldn't be able to afford to live without being in a relationship with him. It's the same with my aunt. If she could realistically afford to leave my uncle and know he wouldn't be destitute, she probably would. I don't think my dad loved either of his wives. I think he married my mom for a green card and was just going to stick it out until things got really bad between them because my mom has mental health issues. I think he married my stepmom because he got her pregnant. She also has mental health issues, but she is at least 1,000 times more competent than my mom at every basic life skill. He absolutely stays with her because she handles basically everything for them. I don't think my stepmother is happy, but that's because she has a lot of childhood trauma, so it's hard to think anyone could make her happy. My dad would rather have her handle everything in his life than find happiness himself. Story 19. When you stay overly dependent on each other for years, you become codependent. Every time my ex-wife and I fought and one of us left, we would come right back, even knowing we were unlikely to get better. We stayed together for so long that being apart felt wrong, even if it was the right thing to do. Story 20. My former boss cannot stand her husband. He retired early and developed a taste for alcohol and bickering. They cannot afford to divorce, so they are stuck in the same house and have been ignoring each other for over a decade. Story 21. I love my children more than I dislike my wife. Our relationship is not toxic. She still seems to care for me a little, but I do not feel like I can depend on her for anything, and I cannot stand talking to her. This is a big deal to me because I always imagined a wife as a best friend who would help me and whom I would help achieve whatever we wanted to do or be. That being said, we do not fight, we are just not close, and after years of marriage counseling, I am certain we will not become close. If I have to endure that to see my children every day, I will. That might be selfish of me, but they really are the absolute coolest things I have ever experienced, and it breaks my heart to imagine missing more of them than work already takes away. Story 22. Hate is a strong word, but I have been in an unhappy marriage for 20 years. I stayed for the children, our religion, and many other reasons, but not for each other. We did more than 6 months of couples therapy before I finally said I had enough and asked for a divorce. Now everyone is questioning the decision, and my wife is acting like I blindsided her, even though I was upfront about this possibility multiple times during our therapy. Divorce is hard. It is painful enough that I understand why people may choose the known discomfort of their marriage rather than go through with it. Story 23. I have observed a few people in this situation. A lot of it is financial, especially in recent years. They cannot afford to live by themselves or do not have the ability to move in with family. If children are involved, there is added financial pressure. Religion plays a big part in some marriages, too. It is more accepted nowadays, but still considered a shameful act. I think the biggest reason is not wanting change. Whether it is for the children, their own well-being, or simply not wanting to waste their invested time together, they would rather stay in an unhappy marriage than start over. They have built their life around their spouse and originally planned to keep it that way. They do not want to redo everything they have already done with a new person who may or may not be better than their current spouse. It is scary to go through, so they prefer to handle their normal and deal with some resentment rather than face uncertainty. I do not agree with it as it is more obvious than they realize, but that is just my theory. Story 24. My parents did this. My father had no backbone, and my mother was abusive and controlling. She wanted to keep her health insurance and extorted money from him. Eventually, he lost his job during the pandemic, and she did not want the possibility of paying him spousal support. They are both deceased now, so I guess the issue resolved itself. Story 25. The following explanation is based on a couple I grew up with, not my previous marriage. He would have taken everything from her, including the children he abused, and she would have had to return to her family in shame. Her family loved her, but emotional and verbal abuse were tolerated culturally. Women were expected to be submissive and serve their husbands. He was extremely religious, and divorce was not allowed in his religion. She did not have a job or any way to support herself and the children. At a certain point, she was too dependent on him and had no friends other than those he approved of. She had no support system. Then came years of gaslighting, breadcrumbing, and other toxic behaviors that eroded her self-esteem. At one point, I asked her why she didn't leave. We could not have conversations in the house because he was always listening, even on the phone. She said it was not that bad and that she had invested too much time for it to be worth the fight. Essentially, she had given up. The funniest thing to me was that he asked me once, just a few years before she died, if she hated him. I did not know if she hated him, and she was not the type of person to hate anyone. I answered honestly and said no, but I wondered how you could be with someone for 40 years and not know if they hated you. Story 26. I was once told by a consultant that my problem had a technical name. It described feeling responsible for a partner whom you believe needs your protection. I cannot remember the exact term. I felt as if I was living with a demon. Story 27. I grew up on a lower economic rung, and for me, financial security is more important than happiness. I am married to an adult who never learned to support themselves. In my jurisdiction, that means alimony. They have some money, but it is all from an inheritance, which does not ease the financial burden on my end, and the money probably will not last very long. I was in the hospital for a week once, and the only reason why all the money in their accounts was not scammed was because they had not or could not set up a digital payment system. In summary, fear, a sense of responsibility, and laziness are the issues in that order. Story 28. My mom and dad were a couple. It made me feel terrible when I was about 9 because my mom told me they had talked about getting a divorce when I was 5. I was so upset that I wet the bed for the first and only time since I was potty trained. My dad was abusive, especially toward my younger brother, who is closest to my age. I felt very bad. I am the oldest, but as a girl, being hit probably wouldn't have been ignored, and I was quiet growing up. They got divorced anyway sometime between when I was 13 and 15. I was sent to live with a different family member, so I don't know the exact timing. I barely saw my parents until I was 18. Story 29. Because without me, she would be homeless. Not because she cannot earn a living, but because she refuses to. She refers to people who work as peasants, which is hilarious because she has never been wealthy in her life. Currently in the divorce process. Stopped caring. Story 30. Because I can't bear the shame of being divorced a third time. My first marriage ended after 2 years due to his infidelity. The second marriage ended because of his emotional and financial abuse. I worked 2 jobs to make ends meet while he lay on the couch waiting for Home Depot to offer him an hourly rate he believed he was worth. My husband now is 16 years older than I am. I was an old soul and he was a young soul when we met 10 years ago. It worked then, but now the age gap is catching up. He is retired and smokes marijuana most of the day while I am still working. It is very hard. Story 31. Because I did file for divorce back in 2007, he stated he was going to pay the filing fee. However, he did not. I moved on with my life and had not seen or spoken to him since 2008. I started checking into filing for divorce again in January this year. At the end of February, he was murdered. Now, I do not have to worry about it. No, I did not kill him. Story 32. I'm not personally, but I think I understand why some people feel this way. I am a person who loves to live alone. I want to run my house the way I want. I want to decorate as I like. I want to do things on my schedule. For example, I don't want someone else telling me to do the dishes at night when I do them in the morning, or someone deciding to do the laundry when they want and not letting me do my laundry on my schedule, which is every other week. I understand that I am like this and need a partner who is willing to accept it. My perfect situation is having my partner and me living in neighboring apartments so we each have our own space. But some people, especially from older generations, are not allowed to be like this. They have to fit into a mold, and if you are like me but force yourself to be what is considered normal, then I can see how you might end up resenting your partner. Especially if it starts to feel like your partner has become another parent. Story 33. My grandfather killed a house full of squatters and threw them down a mine shaft at Lightning Ridge. My mother was always worried my father would do the same to us if we left. Years later, after my father died, I uploaded my DNA to Ancestry in case it helps solve the crime once they are discovered. Story 34. I hated my abusive spouse at the end, even though I still loved him. I stayed much longer than I should have for 2 reasons. The extremely high cost of living where I live and fear of leaving him alone with the children. When we were together, I was always there to step in and de-escalate things. I had to do it several times a week. Even after the divorce, it affected my life because I felt it was important to move within walking distance from my ex so the kids could run away to my house when they needed to. They used it on several occasions. Someone with fewer economic resources might be in a real bind. From his perspective, I cannot figure out why he stayed with me at all because he obviously hated me and never loved me in the first place. But I provided a lot of added value to his life, so that was probably nice. Story 35. I don't hate my spouse, but I don't love her like I used to. She has severe anxiety and is very combative about everything. Even something as simple as going out to the store or going for a walk becomes a debate. Eating normal food is out of the question. Lighting sparklers for our son and other children at our 4th of July party was a hurdle for her. It is exhausting and miserable to put up with day after day. Story 36. Because I don't hate her, I hate her depression. I hate being the one to do all the chores around the house. I hate being the one to shoulder the stress of bills. I hate being the only one who cooks and does the dishes. But I don't hate her. I love my wife. I love my family. I do everything I can to make them happy and try to do what is right for them. It may put a lot on me, it may take up all my time, and it may annoy me to no end. But I can't imagine my life being any other way. Story 37. Simply because I left with my children 10 years ago and cannot find him to serve the divorce papers or child support. He has been missing in action and homeless the whole time. It is okay, we are fine without him. But yes, I guess I am still married to him at this point. Story 38. Sometimes staying in an unhappy marriage is simply a practical decision. Divorce is difficult and also expensive. I suppose it is a matter of what people are willing to live with. Story 39. Conflict avoidance is your answer, plain and simple. I was raised in such a family but grew up to overcome that toxic relationship. Story 40. I was taken advantage of because I was younger and felt like someone loved me for the first time. She lied about everything, being an alcoholic, a far-right religious zealot, and, most of all, abusive. After I uprooted myself from my family and moved across the country, the controlling behavior began. She would threaten me with the worst things imaginable. My sexuality has been a big threat for 5 years because I was openly bicurious when we met. Every time I tried to leave, it got worse. It escalated to threats of calling my job to accuse me of being a rapist or a pedophile. Eventually, she started forcing me to do things to get her pregnant. I won't go into details, but it was basically the closest thing to a man being raped. Now we have a child together, whom I love more than myself and everything despite the circumstances, and we are completely tied together financially. There is nobody to help me when I leave. Her family enables her. I would be homeless in a very rural county. Everything is in her name, the car I paid for and the apartment. So yes, I stick it out every day, miserable. Maybe I understand the boomer humor now. Story 41. Sometimes it is not practical. I knew divorcing my spouse was not feasible for her or the children, and I could reasonably predict negative outcomes. I was right. Even years of preparing her and trying to make her ready failed. I went so far as to teach her how to shut off the water and left instructions on how to handle a water leak, but she mishandled that situation. I have been helping her manage crisis after crisis. Recently, I had to drive her because she lost her driving privileges due to another in a long series of accidents. She was the petitioner in the divorce, primarily over parenting disputes, and could not manage our adopted son. The first week after our separation, she left him at her parents' house. I stepped back and despite objections from my attorney, who felt I was setting myself up for child support obligations for a child who is not biologically mine or hers, but is our nephew. I wish I were making all or any of this up. It is a train wreck, and maybe I was wrong to file for divorce after she tried to rescind the divorce she initiated. Story 42. My brother says bad things about his wife, but she is a wonderful person. I think he is just a toxic person. Story 43. My parents are a couple. Frankly, I think a large part of it is a mixture of misanthropy and self-punishment. My father is a mean-spirited person, raised by an incredibly abusive father who would beat the brakes off of him, his mother, and his siblings, of which he has 8 known half-siblings. His mother was incredibly passive about her husband's behavior and her son's later absolute disrespect for women. He never had a template for a healthy relationship and never sought to better himself. When people talk about toxic masculinity, he is the definition: very repressed, very angry, very internally insecure. He grew up to be an abusive alcoholic and thinks there is nothing wrong with him because he didn't beat us into unconsciousness like his father did him. My mother is the product of a good home but has some severe mental health defects that were never addressed, alongside major abandonment issues. She is an absolute control freak and is completely terrified of letting go. There was a point when we were certain she would leave him after we had all graduated high school. Then our father had a major health event during my youngest sibling's final year. Now he is disabled and has some brain damage, so she feels she cannot leave him, despite his personality having only changed for the worse, because it would make her look bad. She also needs to be needed, so she almost thrives on it. They do not like each other at all. He treats her poorly and she fights back just as hard. Ultimately, he does not know any other way to be and she is afraid to be alone. Neither actually has the will or desire to be better or do better. Essentially, they are the definition of misery loves company with a heaping side of trauma and codependency. For my part, I almost became like them and married someone I loathed. I was married for 4 years to a partner who treated me poorly. One day I woke up and realized I was going to be just like my parents if I didn't leave, and that terrified me more than any of the abuse I experienced. Story 44. My cousin works for the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and her husband is an engineer. They have one son. They are both very successful but argue all the time. I suspect that they are too financially careful to get a divorce. In the end, neither of them wants to pay the costs associated with divorce. Story 45. My aunt has cheated on her husband 3 times. He has cheated multiple times, including accusations involving a pregnant Polish woman, which he most likely did not do. She was recently asked what she would do in a zombie invasion and said she would really regret losing her kitchen. They stay together for the house and no other reason, making each other perpetually miserable. If you talk to my aunt, she will bring you down with her while insisting, "I've never had help or money, we've made our assets." However, she has also never declared taxes on her cleaning job. I have not heard from her since my grandmother died. Story 46. Not me, but my parents. We kids told our parents to please divorce ever since I was 9 years old. My mom stayed because she was afraid he would manipulate us against her if she only had us half the time. That fear was valid. Dad even tried to manipulate us against Mom when she was around. I am afraid I would have eventually started to side with Dad. Dad also threatened Mom financially a lot, which added an extra layer of stress. They ended up divorcing when I was 19 years old, and now Mom has found someone nice. I am really happy for her. Dad is still a messy person. Story 47. I didn't know I disliked her. The term is in quotes because it is both too strong and lacks nuance. High school friends, marriage, and 4 children. A relationship spanning nearly 25 years. It was not until after we separated that I realized how much I disliked being with her and how unloved I had felt. We each knew for certain the bad parts were the other's fault. I think we have both softened on that in the decades since. I remain certain that we could have fixed things if I had convinced her to give couples counseling a real chance. Individual counseling might have helped either or both of us. I guess we are friends now. I do not think either of us particularly enjoys spending time together. We have both since remarried, and my second marriage is better than I could have imagined. These 20 years have been the easiest thing my second wife and I have ever done. Story 48. My wife would take my daughter to Japan, her birth country, and I would have no way to get my child back because of the laws and government of Japan. This happened frequently to French fathers. I am from France. Story 49. Not me, but a good friend had parents who hated each other. According to him, they stayed together for the children, but when the children all grew up and moved out, they decided to separate. Story 50. I don't hate my husband, but I can't say the same for him. Lots of things keep us living together. 1. I am on the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder spectrum and waiting for treatment. The logistical challenge of moving out discourages me. There is the logistical challenge of sharing parenting when we do not live together. We cannot afford 2 houses where we are, and I cannot move far enough away to an affordable area because my parents are in their 80s, so I need to be close to them. Story 51. My 26-year-old mother, 64 years old, has never said that she hates my father, 58 years old, but she doesn't really have to. She is an extremely quiet, severe older woman who probably has autism. I have autism and I assume I inherited it from her genetically. She is essentially robotic. She is the oldest daughter and a doctor, so she has always been in charge both in my household and in my extended family, but not in a loud or bossy way. in a quiet, calculated way. There are things I respect about her, but she is impossible to really know as a person. The only feeling she expresses is anger. My father is emotionally stunted and extremely immature. He throws toddler-like tantrums when things don't go his way and struggles to take adult responsibilities seriously. He is socially unaware, extremely awkward, and clueless. I am not exaggerating when I say that my mother parents both of us. She talks to and about my father like he is a child. She scolds him when he gets in trouble, such as neglecting his chores, saying something awkward, or talking right over people, and sometimes even imposes consequences. For example, he used to buy too much milk, so my mother banned him from buying any milk at all. She does all the cleaning and planning for the household because he is either actually inept or practicing weaponized incompetence. It is hard to tell sometimes. But strangely, he has very strong romantic feelings about her and idolizes her as a smart, almost perfect woman. They have never slept in the same room, and the only proof I have that they ever did is that I exist and look exactly like them. I think my mother married him to have a child, me, but I do not think I turned out the way she wanted. And now she is stuck with him. There is a lot more to the story, but that is the gist. Story 52. I don't love him anymore, but I want him to be happy and safe. He loves me so much and has not changed. I was the one who changed. I feel like I am taking care of a boy instead of having a husband. Story 53. My kids are not 18 yet, but close. It is difficult losing your wife to Instagram and all the nonsense of it. After 20 years, it is not fun to compete against some random person giving out careless advice on behalf of a bad company. Story 54. My parents have this relationship. It is a mix of stigma, conservative family values, and a bizarre codependence. They are miserable with each other, but I think they would be more miserable without each other. I am grown up and married and baffled by their relationship anytime I think about it. Story 55. I have met many men who resent their wives and are old, to be honest. It just becomes comfortable and you accept it and live up to your commitment, a value that is disappearing. The financial impact is also a consideration. Cutting your retirement in half is a hard reality to face when you are old. Sharing it makes that much easier. Story 56. I have two friends who really should separate from their husbands. One of them has a child, and she had a difficult time when her parents separated, so she is determined that they stay together until the child turns 18. The other friend, I am not sure. She has been in a relationship almost continuously since high school, over 40 years, and does not really know how to be on her own. Neither of them is in a bad or abusive situation. Story 57. I had a coworker like this. She stayed for the medical benefits. Her husband is a member of the army station nearby. Story 58. Not me, but a friend. She does not hate her husband as such, but he is almost certainly financially abusive to her, and he and his family are emotionally abusive to each other and to her. He also drinks far too much and is a workaholic, leaving her to effectively parent the children herself. She is extremely lucky that her parents are wealthy and mostly supportive of her. The house they currently own and live in is largely financed by her father. For reasons I cannot share, the husband is financially controlled by his own father and is terrified of him. She has not left him because they have two young children and divorce is still a big stigma in their conservative Asian community. As a single mother, she would probably be even more ostracized by the community. If she stays, she can maintain the image and status of a wife of a fairly successful man. He is also in a job where public image is important, so they both share the need to keep a good image for the wider audience. It is hard to believe this still happens in 2025, but here we are. She is constantly on social media posting picture-perfect posts of the family, but I am the one getting all the behind-the-scenes updates on how he is treating her. I once told her that she is already effectively a single mother in her own marriage. She seems to have come to terms with that. These are all highly educated and intelligent people, but social stigma and norms still play an outsized part. Story 59. My ex's mother lived in an area where it was very difficult for women to leave their husbands, even though he was mentally ill. It was not until he kidnapped my ex's brother, and tried to murder him that the mother took whatever steps were necessary to escape with her children. She was a doctor in a place where women were rarely doctors. Only 14% of doctors are women, and just 24% of women work at all. She had to be strong for her children. I remain constantly impressed by this woman. My point is that some couples feel they have no choice. Story 60. My sister has been separated from her husband for 15 years. They have not spoken except once a year for tax purposes. They remain married for tax purposes. Story 61. My parents were like this growing up but aren't anymore. They are so mellow now. I think there were two main reasons why they were like that. One was their age. They had me at 13 or 14. The second reason is they both had a tough mentality. They raised me to be violent, swing first and deal with the consequences. They were so violent themselves. They never hit each other, but they would get very close, right into each other's faces. I have also seen both of them fight multiple times, and they have seen me fight as well. In my early 20s, they moved to a much nicer neighborhood, lost that tough mentality, and mellowed out. Every day no longer felt like you could get hurt. It changed all our personalities, along with medicine too. Now they are in their mid-50s, barely fight, and truly enjoy themselves in retirement. But every day growing up was a battle. Story 62. My parents were like this. The answer was simple: money. My mother once told me that she calculated the odds of outliving my father were in her favor, and that she would get everything rather than having to settle for half. Spoiler: she died first. Story 63. I just do not have the energy to go through a divorce. I put 100% of the deposit into our house and pay the majority of the mortgage and bills. At least this way I get to live in it. She told me that she would take everything she could if we divorced, and that was said out of the blue on a good day. I think I need a year or two to plan my exit, but I work so much that I just do not have the energy. Story 64. I am not, but my mother is. The man is a deadbeat who will take half of everything she owns if she divorces him, and she cannot afford that. Story 65. My parents had an arranged marriage. It was abusive in every way. My mom even tried to kill my dad a few times but could never go through with it. My dad cut her off from everything: her studies. She was studying to be an interior designer. Her money. She kept a secret bank account for herself and the kids, and even her friends. His friends' wives were to be her friends, and he engineered it so they would be. They stayed together for the kids. They waited until I was 18. I am the youngest, before they separated. Divorce came the next year. To those staying together for the kids, please do not. I still blame myself for growing up and turning 18. I blame myself for the failure of our family, and my siblings make it clear every day. Story 66. Because I rely on him for survival while I complete college and take care of our young children. I also do not want my children to be heartbroken over a broken home like the one I came from. Story 67. I was trapped and miserable with my ex-wife, but I stayed for the kids. Not because I thought they would be better off with both of us there, not because they made it bearable, but because I knew if I left, she would get majority custody. That is the way it works around here. The only way I could get my 50% custody was by waiting her out. Eventually, she came to her senses and let me go. Now my kids live with me 50% of the time, and everyone is much happier. My ex-wife and I get along much better as co-parents than we ever did as spouses. Story 68. Some people just need to express their feelings in a neutral setting, which can give a false impression of the relationship. I love my wife and would not want to risk changing anything in our relationship, but it annoys me when she does not clean up. Instead of upsetting her over a minor annoyance, I might express my frustration at work to feel better. Work colleagues might think we do not get along, but actually everything is great. Story 69. Because we are from deep New England, saying, "I hate you so much, you moron," is our way of expressing, "I love you and respect your intelligence." It is very confusing to our Midwestern neighbors now that we are transplants. Story 70. I have 2 young children. I do not want to live a divorced life and put all of us through that. I would rather endure the pain inside, at least until they grow up. Story 71. because he wanted the separation and left, because he never takes accountability, because if I file, then obviously it was my choice, and he can rewrite the narrative to be the victim. I do not hate him. I am just tired of being stuck. Story 72. My parents have this. They never separate because of my brother and me. It is culturally unacceptable, financial reasons, and according to my dad, getting married and having kids is what you are supposed to do. Nothing else. Fast forward to today, my brother and I are in our late to mid-30s and my parents do not even talk to each other. They live like college roommates and they stay because, what else am I supposed to do? I wish my parents had gotten a divorce. My mother is a terrible person, which my dad did not realize until he married her. Fortunately for me, I have experienced that my entire life. I am closer to my dad and he does have his flaws. We all do, but he did the best he could. Watching my parents' marriage made me question love, marriage, and relationships. I have gone through therapy and read Recovering from Emotionally Immature Parents. But I am still very hesitant. Story 73. I am not married, but I have relatives who stayed together to maintain wealth and a higher standard of living. That is probably why I am not married, because that is what I do not want. Story 74. Simple answer. We are both in our 60s and heavily invested financially. We each lead our own lives. So getting divorced would be a step backward and financially ruin us both. Story 75. My mother-in-law and father-in-law are so toxic. They have been separated for 15 years, yet they are buying another house together. Their favorite thing is to trap me with them while my partner is in the bathroom and start bullying each other. Story 76. My mom stayed until she saved enough money to leave him. She worked full-time and paid all of the bills. He did not contribute because he was always working on the next millionaire idea and spent any money he had access to. Story 77. I am separated but not legally divorced. I have been separated for more than 5 years. I thought I was legally divorced and that things were officially finalized in 2021. However, I did not find out until almost 2 years later that apparently my ex did not complete the paperwork on his end. My lawyer's office indicated it would have been extremely unlikely that this was accidental on his part. But since I genuinely did not know I was not divorced until I went to sell old property, I can understand him not knowing. It is just unlikely. Why have I not pursued the legal divorce? Fear and safety. It is better not to exist in his life in any way. Maybe he will be informed when he goes to remarry someday, and he can then finally finish things on his end and do it unilaterally or something. That would be easiest and safest, I think. Him having control of it is better than me interfering and finding out. Sometimes it is safer to let a sleeping dog lie. Story 78. My mother's reason is that she stayed together for us kids because she did not make enough money to keep the house by herself. I told her I would have rather lived in a studio apartment with her and my brother than grow up with an abusive, drug-addicted, alcoholic father. Story 79. I cannot see any way of making a separation work that does not make things worse for all of us. He does not think things are as bad as I do, even though I have been blunt about it. He became someone I do not recognize, but now I am connected to him permanently because of the children. If I won a large sum of money, I would be out the door in an instant. Story 80. My husband flat out told me he will not keep our young child away from his brother, who is a known abuser of animals. My life is very difficult. Story 81. Not married at the time, but shortly before COVID-19, my then-girlfriend was living with me. I desperately wanted to break up with her, but the month I planned to, her parents were in a severe motorcycle accident. I then felt terrible about the idea of kicking her out while her parents were recovering. Took about 1.5 years to end the relationship, but it was done. Story 82. My grandparents did not exactly hate each other, but my grandmother was miserable in their marriage. My grandfather was not a kind person. He would call her racial slurs, hit her once to my knowledge, had a secret homosexual relationship, which was discovered because my father and uncle followed him to a hotel, and sexually assaulted multiple children, including family members. I asked my grandmother why she stayed before I knew the full extent of it. All she could say was that no one else would want her. At the time, I was too young to understand. The older I get, the more heartbroken I feel about it. They married at 18, and he spent their lives telling her no one else would have her. She died before she knew anything about the assaults within the family. She tried leaving once when I was a child. My grandfather was struggling with acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. My uncle and father convinced her to come back to help him. Story 83. In-laws are like this. He is abusive to everyone and has told her she is nothing without him. He will take all the money, and she will not get a cent. She is too trusting and a shell of a human to believe it. The best quote was, "But he has never laid a hand on me. That is foolish." Story 84. My parents will never say it, but they make it abundantly clear with their actions and how they talk to each other. They hate one another. They have threatened divorce many times over the course of my childhood, even as recently as last year. I am 25 now, but they always back out of it. I asked my mom why she does not just leave him when she is clearly unhappy. She knows she can manage herself just fine, as she is a perfectly independent person. My dad has a good job, so he would be okay too. She says it is because she is worried about him coming after her for money because they do not have a prenuptial agreement. I am sure that, and the general messiness associated with divorce proceedings are a big part of it. I also think they are worried about my older brother with autism, who is 29. He lives on his own but requires a lot of surveillance and support, both financially and mentally. They have guardianship over him, and I am not sure how that would work if they split up. Either way, I think they worry about how it would impact him if they separated. Plus, they would probably never want to see each other again, which is impossible with an autistic adult relying on both of them. There is also my other brother who still has not figured his life out at all. He is 27. They are staying together mainly for my brothers, I think. But their relationship never should have happened, in my opinion. I know I am not one to judge, and their problems are not my business. But it is kind of hard not to, given how much they have included me in their arguments instead of talking to a therapist. Story 85. Because sometimes it is not hate. It is heartbreak that has calcified into bitterness. I am not divorced yet because I have spent over a decade being the emotional caretaker for someone who never learned to take care of themselves. I told myself, she needs me. Every time she broke down, lashed out, or spiraled, I stayed through depression, emotional affairs, hospital visits, and total dependency. Not out of love, but out of guilt, loyalty, and fear of breaking my daughter's heart. Leaving her does not just mean ending a marriage. It means risking the collapse of the only support system she has. That weight makes me feel like the villain even when I know I am not. We have a child, and I did not want her to grow up with the scars of separation, until I realized she is already growing up inside emotional silence and tension. She has no income, no car, no real-world skills, and I feel like if I walk away, she will collapse, and I will carry that forever. Sometimes, even when the marriage is over, the act of leaving feels like committing emotional murder, even if you have been the one dying inside for years. That is why. But I am getting there. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.